Next on our agenda, we have Mr. Otis Monroe, CEO of the Monroe Foundation. Otis Chandler Monroe III, minister, nonprofit manager, lecturer, organizer, is the founder and CEO of the Monroe Foundation. Has been a part of the Chicagoland community organizing scene for more than 45 years. It's okay for me to tell that? Okay. He lectures on community development issues and small business development as an adjunct with the City Colleges of Chicago through a program the Monroe Foundation launched called the Small Business Boot Camp. Otis leads the Monroe Foundation, a 27-year-old community reinvestment and economic justice advocate organization that guides a collaboration of over 100 nonprofit and faith-based organizations to address the unique needs of more than 24 underserved communities of color. The foundation has also served to incubate, inform, fundraise, and provide added stability for other nonprofit social service and advocacy groups, including the Black Star Project, Genesis Housing Development Corporation, Center for Community Development, Teach Me How, the Inglewood Food Network, Kingdom Community Incorporated, North Lawndale Employment Network, and Agora Community Service Corporation. Mr. Monroe is a 1991 Roosevelt University graduate fellow in nonprofit management, and he brings us the conversation of nonprofit structure. A lot of times when we apply for funding opportunities, they want to know what the structure is of our organization, and they ask for documents. A lot of times we start with our passion, and we don't necessarily take the time to articulate on paper our structure, and then we scramble when it's time to apply for funds. So thank you, Mr. Monroe. Please welcome him.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Actually, I'm taking this in a slightly different direction. I didn't focus so much on the technical aspects of not-for-profit work, and I hope I don't disappoint you, Brother Philip, because I prayed and I asked the Lord, what should I focus on, the technical aspects of the nonprofit structure or the philosophy behind the work of nonprofit structure? And I do have a presentation. Was it passed out?
I didn't receive that.
That's okay. I have mine, and I'll share it. So my sharing with you today the nonprofit structure, more than asking for a grant, it's about relationships, value, and impact. And I think, whereas those of you as nonprofit managers, nonprofit leaders can become so efficient in the paperwork or the technical aspects of the work that you're doing and running your not-for-profit and having your board meetings and writing your proposal and asking for funding, then you become saddened and sore at heart, disappointed at heart because you didn't get funded. And often, I find in the last 30 years, those nonprofit leaders that started off funding the work themselves or investing in the work of the nonprofit organization themselves, but are hard-pressed and always challenged and never seems to ever get any larger source of funding outside of their own pockets or that of their governing, their organizing board of directors, is because you built no relationships in the community. You build no relationship that adds no value or any value to the work that you're doing, that makes no impact. And just like we teach in business, location is a critical part of being in business. In the nonprofit world, relationships. So I want to break the relationship, value, and impact down into three focus areas. Relationship begins with your community, then with the grant maker. Can strong relationships contribute to the impact of your mission? That's the question. How? Who can tell me how?
It can shape your mission. If you understand the people that you're working with or working for, then you know what their needs may be or what voice you may be filling.
Anybody else? And you're making my point in one way, because everybody should be clamoring to answer that question based upon it is assumed you're building relationships in your community. Question to ask yourself, really. Do you know the names, interests, dreams, and ambition of the people you serve, interact with, or advocate for? Or do you see their problems as a group and not as individuals, and only delivers a moment-to-moment response? What is a moment-to-moment response? Feeding the stomach each week without filling the gap that brings them every week to you, including that of those that you are asking to support the organizational work. Do you engage, involve, cultivate, or build the voices of those you serve or advocate for to take a leadership role in their own problems and issues? Or do you do all the leading? Are you the spokesperson at the press conference? Are you always in the picture? Or the persons or the individual that you're cultivating to be a leader or spokesperson on the issue of hunger or lack of jobs or violence in the community, are you cultivating them by virtue of relationship building to put them up front? Or is it always Otis in front? Ain't nobody trying to see you. You may have, no, seriously, you may find a little humor in that, okay, ha ha ha. But it's not about you. It's not about you. And a lot of black-led organizations, particularly at the emerging level, can't get it out of your head. It ain't about you. And I'm here to tell you, it's not about you. It's about the relationships you're building in the community to articulate the issue, the problems, and the solutions. Do you communicate regularly with those you serve with a phone call, handwritten note of thanks? Treat your leaders, volunteers, to something special that cements a relationship. Do you know how to interview a person without letting them know what you're doing? Do you regularly find ways to work with other community organizations on joint projects to build relationships? Sometimes it can't always be about you. Sometimes you have deficits in how you're able at the emerging stage of your organization to be effective in the work that you're doing. How can you leverage groups that have similar missions or purpose? Working together is okay. In fact, in some funding views, it's becoming more and more the order of the day. How do you collaborate with others? Who knows you out there? Value. The work of your organization should have such a value to those you service or advocate for that ceasing to operate a program, closing the doors, or shutting down the organization should cause such an outcry from those that find your service or advocacy as having a value to their lives. Did you get that? Do you believe that? Let's look at how we begin to build relationships with local officials to identify their self-interests, as well as the individuals that we serve and advocate for. And how do we involve our base and those in the decision-making process that allows them to own the advocacy the organization engages, begins to build value. Let their voices actually be heard above your voice, adding momentum to the value. It's very easy as the founder or as the person with the passion that started the organization just to have an idea that I really know what's going on out there. I really do. You really can believe me. Believe me now and hear me later. I know what's going on out there. And then you become so full of yourself, quite frankly, so full of yourself that those that you allege to advocate for, to service, they're trying to tell you they're trying to give you a deeper perspective on the issue that plagues them, that bothers them, that concerns them, that you're so caught up and stuffed up full of pride, as the Bible says, that you don't hear them. Or maybe you don't want to hear them because you got biases about them because they're snagger-toothed or they smell bad. But no, I'm serious. I've been doing this a long time. And you don't like the way they look. So you already formed an opinion about them, making you no less than those that oppress them in some cases. Let their voices actually be heard above your voice, adding momentum to the value that you're working to build as you build relationship. Do you designate leadership roles for the voices in meetings, press conferences, pitching to a grant maker, a donor? These are things that cements the relationship. You know, it really kills me, Philip, kills me, is when, in the work of the Monroe Foundation, when we're providing coaching to help our nonprofit members get ready to meet a funder, and when I or my team say, well, Ori, I know you're the founder and executive director, but you can't come meet with the donor. What? But it's my organization. You got that wrong to begin with. If you have, and this is where we begin at the Monroe Foundation to see gaps in your structure. When you can't go forward with a meeting that you should be part of, or a press conference you should be involved in, or meeting with a funder or prospective funder, unless Ori is there, unless Otis is there, that tells us right there's a significant gap in your structure. You have not cultivated any relationship because no one is finding value to your work, and eventually it's not going to have any impact because the organizational mission and the work that flows from the mission should surpass your personality, you as the individual. It should always be about those individuals. How are you putting them in leadership roles? How are you cultivating them to be leadership? How are you cultivating them to be the spokesperson for the value and the impact of your mission, your advocacy, and your service? So, how are you designating leadership roles for the voices in meetings and press conferences, or pitching to a potential grant maker or donor? These are things that begins to cement the relationship. And then there's making an impact. Now you have been building relationships and adding value to the work of the organization by engaging these new relationships as voices with a stake in the mission of the work. Now you begin to leverage all of this to make an impact. Your work got to have impact. Sister Erica made a very good point. A lot of groups applied for, when all the foundations got together 3 years ago as a result of the advocacy of the Black Star Project, and created the fund, the Chicago Fund for Safe and Peaceful Community, $500,000 in the initial pot to fund what was initially these Labor Day weekend anti-violence activities. Okay. And Philip and I, unbeknownst to you all, we played the inside game. Here was the inside game. Philip would call the question of accountability on philanthropy. What are you doing with the money? I'm going to put the president of the Chicago Community Trust on my website blast next to a hot dog. The trust said, let them eat hot dogs. Then the trust calls up the Monroe Foundation. Mr. Monroe, did you see what Philip did? What did Philip do? He put my face on next to a hot dog and said, I told black folks to go eat hot dog. He did what? I'm shocked and appalled. Well, what should I do, Monroe? Oh, you should meet with him and hear him out. It worked, but that's relationship, which became trust. For him to feel trusting enough to tell me this is what an initial conversation took place. What was the response? And, well, if I tell you this, Philip, I need to be able to hide my hand, but this is how I want you to come back at him, because I knew what was going to happen. And then I'll get the call, and because I'm kind of the safe Negro in one regard. No, really, trust me. So I knew I was going to get that call because I was working a different strategy with the Chicago Community Trust on this particular fund. So I knew I was going to get the shocked and appalled And I would do the what kind of thing. But it worked. But my point to that, so that first year, a lot of groups applied, got a lot of small not-for-profit groups, and some that weren't even organized formally as not-for-profit, received some of that funding, $5,000, $10,000 with a cap. And then the following year, some of those same groups that were grantees the previous year didn't get funded, and even more so this third year. And we played more of a coordinating role with the trust this year. So a lot of the groups that got funded the first year or second year got refunded the third year. Here's my theory why. I don't have a PhD research background. I just have practice and wisdom. Thank you. Before, we had applicants, recondition and others, apply this year. Because one of the things we do with funders that come to us and ask us to we're going to come out with this this grant initiative. We would like the Monroe Foundation to begin to identify groups that may fit within the parameters of what we're looking to support. Hear what I'm saying when I say that. Do you fit within the parameters of the initiative? You may think something you're doing is a good thing, and it probably really is a good thing, but does it fit? Does it fit? And if it don't fit, it just don't fit. And if you try to make it fit, it's still not going to fit because it's not real. So we started to engage groups at least a month and a half in advance of looking at what were they funded to do before, and how do you build upon it? Because if you're already going to this, they see making your case for the ask for the grant is more than just what you write on a piece of paper and say what I'm doing. How did you even add value to that work that made an impact based on relationships you build in the community? I suggest to you, friends, there are many of you, there's many I know, don't even have working websites. One of the things a donor, a prospect, or a prospective funder does is even I get a proposal from you. Let me Google you. You got links not working, can't build a relationship and show value, make an impact that way. If your website is down, links don't work, outdated information, you don't have a dedicated email for your name. So I'm Otis Monroe, the Monroe Foundation, but if you want to send me an email, call it at pimpdaddy105@AOL.com. I'm telling the truth. So some will not even begin to read the proposal because it's inconsistent with the norms and the expectancies. But larger than that, you have to begin to ask the question, what relationships are they building out there? What value are they adding to anybody's lives? And what impact is being made? So you don't have the presentation, and I'll get your cards and I'll send it to you, or it's on that website. But I put some examples of some photos. That photo right there. That photo right there. This was our initiative in Inglewood. Now, while everybody else is jumping up and down, $10,000 from the Chicago Community Trust ain't no money at all. You foolish Negroes. Because those kids take $10,000 and turned it into $30,000 last summer. Those kids who otherwise would have been on the grind, selling cocaine, crack, loose square, bootleg CDs, open up their own retail shop at 6030 in Halsted inside this thing called a boombox. They leveraged that with $30,000 for some of the banks, and they earned about $20,000 in sales that they distributed to themselves. And what we did to show the value is that picture emphasizes the multicultural relationship between the youth that participated in the boombox. It showed how they valued one another and the impact, that picture alone. Because when I took that picture and blasted it out as a newsletter, not my picture, the kids.
Where did the picture come from,
I was coming to that. I'm glad you asked that question. This gentleman there, Hurley Green of the Bulletin newspaper. But here's my point, because I want to leave any questions. But my point being, took that picture of the relationships developed amongst youth of diverse geographic boundaries, ethnicity, and religion, and showed what the impact was in their life, along with a story. And the funders made it their cause to reinvest even larger in that initiative. So to Erica's point and others, they did the hot dog thing and all that. Got to do that to get their peers to be involved. But we didn't emphasize all that. And a lot of the groups that got refunded this year, when we had our strategy session, we said, remember, Sunita, we talked about what's the elevation that shows the impact and why they need to continue to invest in this. Because the way you're supposed to look at that fund for safe communities, that $5, $10, $2,000 you make good, is a pathway towards the larger funding opportunity. If you play this right, all this has to have strategy. But the first strategy begins with the relationship you build amongst those that you're working with and how they feel that work you're providing has value and how you are able to promote the impact. The impact. I never see a report from many of the smaller groups on what you're doing. Well, I'm trying to figure out a way to get me a salary. Our philosophy, you got $5,000, take $500, find somebody that can write an impact report above and beyond the electronic report you have to send to the Chicago Community Trust. Write an impact report, an evaluative report. Make yourself a player. But if all you do is showing pictures of, hey, everybody jumping jazz, oh, we painting all this, then all the Negroes go home afterwards. October 31st come and go, that's when the grand period's over. But you're showing, we're so committed to this work. We're out of money, but we ain't out of drive. How are you building relationships that add value, that shows an impact? I'll take any questions if you have any. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. One of the comments by the first speaker this morning was about the alignment between the funders and the community getting closer. And one of the comments he said about which groups fit their grant-making initiatives. How do you work with them to get them to align their grant-making activities to fit more with the needs of the community?
Sure. That's good. Let me qualify that. Oftentimes, when they come to us with asking us to identify groups that align with a new initiative they're moving towards, we have been involved in that conversation at its incipient stage. So yes, and we try to find opportunities to encourage our members in particular in the nonprofit community at large to be involved. For example, I'm very intrigued by this, Harvey, Philip. The Woods Fund, which I think of late has been a little disconnected since Deborah Harrington left. But I got an email last week that the Woods Fund is having a listening tour. They want to know how they are not connecting in communities of color. Now, sure.
The Woods Fund, that President Obama set on that board, was the foundation that funded community organizing back in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
So the disconnect to community for the Woods is a big deal. And
big deal.
I think that's why they are realizing we got to get back to what got us out the gate. And funding community organizing was who they were. That's who they were.
Right. So, and if you give me a card, I'll send you the email. I pray it's not too late. But here's the thing, because I would like to add you all to our database. You don't have to be a member to get the information that's available in the general public. You just have to be a member for the advocacy. Now, one of the things that the Monroe Foundation does, because we get inside information or get these alerts, let me put it like that, in advance of what a funder is looking at doing, like the Woods Fund. That's public information. Now, I will send this information out, Ari, and then I will get a phone call. Well, they're going to tell me how to come get some money? You fool. That's a relationship building opportunity for you to be in the room, not only with a potential supporter, but amongst your peers. Amongst your peers or others who are doing some aspect of the work that you're doing. You have to understand, hear me, let's say this on Saturday Night Live, hear me now and believe me later. If you're not creating a brand for what you're doing out there, some folks may get sick of an email from the Monroe Foundation. And I don't care if you get sick, because I know somebody is always reading my stuff and eventually picks up the phone call like Julia Stash at the MacArthur Foundation said, you're too small for us to fund the work you're getting ready to do with ex-offenders organizationally. But I do know some people. You're following going with this here? Because relationship bill, I knew I was never going to get funded by MacArthur. But I know she knows those who know those who knows those. It's all about relationship and being willing to show and demonstrate that whether I got a grant or contribution, there's some aspect of this work because it's so mission driven, I'm going to do anyway. That's really the key thing. You're so committed to the mission of your work, you're going to do it anyway. Anyway, and last thing, if I leave you with, as I teach my students, as I coach my members, whatever the work that you're doing, what's the new doo-doo out there? Because if you're doing, if I love Mike Flager, but you're never going to see me out there laying out in the ground. I'm not going to do it. I'm almost 60. It ain't going to happen. But most importantly, afterwards, then what? The march is over. Then what? I'm not going to march for Black Lives Matter down on Michigan Avenue. You shut down Black Lives. You shut down all the stores in Michigan Avenue for 2 hours. And then when the march dispersed, then you go inside the very stores you just shut down, McDonald's and the others, Chipotle, and help them make some money, while your black restaurant in your black neighborhood got to close. I'm not me. When we had our meeting, I'm done. Our meeting on Tuesday with the Field Foundation called Narratives of Color, I told folks, and let me share this, very important with you, very important to share. If a corporate donor or someone in philanthropy is working with your organization, looking at how to support your cause, you made a case for investing in your cause, do not be so quick to join everybody's advocacy to call them out. You heard how Angelique opened up. She looks at Philip and I for insight because we made it intentional to build a relationship with her, as we did with Ari when she was the executive director. So I feel I have a moral obligation to protect Angelique if folks are going to come at the Field Foundation in a foul way. And a moral obligation to put her to correction if institutionally they're foul on the issue. But if they're working with you and somebody says, we're going to go on the attack, every fight ain't your attack. Because you got Negro organizations out here that will try to swamp you into their mess. Then they cut the check. I'm telling you, it's 45 years talking. They'll cut the check and tell you, well, we can support you, but thank you for bringing your troops.